Okay, sorry about the break. Part 3. The Moon is a whopping 1/4 the size of Earth. The next largest satellite circling a planet that is anywhere near that ratio is whirling around Jupiter, and it is only 1/8 the size of its master. Because of the Moon's proportionally great size, some scientists have even labeled the Earth-Moon combination as an actual double planetary system. Discussing the problem of having the Moon where it is, Dr. Asimov asks, small planets, such as Earth, with weak gravitational fields might well lack satellites. Pluto has no known satellites, neither have Mercury or Venus. Yet Earth, quite surprisingly, does have a satellite. It is not just having satellites, it is primarily the size of those satellites. In general, when a planet does have a satellite, there would be every reason to suspect that at best it would be a tiny world, perhaps 30 miles in diameter. The Moon is 2,160 miles in diameter. It is way too big for the Earth. Also, the Moon's orbit is too nearly circular and synchronized. Such a gravitational capture should have produced a rather elongated elliptical orbit instead of a nearly circular path the Moon now follows. The Moon is a celestial freak in several other respects. Almost all other satellites in the solar system circle their respective planets in the same plane of the orb's equator. But not our Moon. Its orbit instead lies strangely closer to the Earth's orbit around the Sun. Puzzled scientists wonder, why is our Moon circling the Earth outside of its usual equatorial planetary orbit? They don't know. Also, it should be noted that more scientists look at the evidence brought back from the Moon, the more that they are convinced that it was formed at some remote corner of the galaxy, and was captured by the Earth several thousand years ago. The problem with the capture theory is that, for one, the Moon is way too big. Secondly, its orbit is too perfectly circular and too far out from the Earth. If the Earth happened to simply capture the Moon within its orbit, its gravitational orbit, for one, the Moon would be in an elliptical, elongated orbit. It's perfectly circular, nearly perfectly circular. Also, the Moon is way too big for a planet our size to pick up just through its gravitational pull. Doesn't make sense. Originally, 10 flights to the Moon have been scheduled. In fact, Apollo 18 and 19 rockets were already paid for, and the astronauts were trained and were waiting to go. Yet, these last two scheduled Moon missions were cut. Why were they slashed, when, as one science report tells us, the hardware had already been purchased? Even critics of manned spaceflights, like Dr. Thomas Gold of Cornell University, screamed out against these nonsensical cuts. It's like buying a Rolls Royce and then not driving it because you want to save a few bucks on the gas. Why have we not gone back to the Moon? Our technology gets better every fucking day, which would logically make you assume that it would be easier for us to get to the Moon with less trouble, but no. Just completely stopped. For no reason whatsoever. A few of these things have pictures accompanying them, which you have to look at, but also very compelling evidence, so I suggest you look it up. Another thing is, there are these things that they refer to as the rays. The rays are beginning to look like they were made by something tracking the powder up out of the crater and in straight lines to other craters. The rays is this strange white powder that they find leading from the center of one crater directly across to another crater. It was found by the Apollo astronauts that this powder clings to everything and was, in fact, a great nuisance to them, as it clung to their suits, their faceplates, camera lenses, cables, etc., and even found its way into the lunar module. However, once it got into the lunar module, it lost its adhesive quality. So here's this ominous white powder that they can't identify whatsoever, and it sticks to everything. It's a big nuisance, and as soon as they enter the lunar module, it loses all of its adhesive properties. It doesn't. It's not sticky anymore. What is this shit? What? I mean, that doesn't make any sense at all. Okie dokie. Now, this is a direct quote from Isaac Asimov. It is a shame that one small thing remains unaccounted for. One trifling thing I've ignored so far. But what in the blazes is our moon doing way out there? It is too far out to be a true satellite of Earth. It is too big to have been captured by the Earth, and the chances of such a capture having been affected, and the moon then having taken up a nearly circular orbit around the Earth, are too small to make such eventuality credible. But then, if the moon is neither a true satellite of the Earth nor captured one, what is it? After the successful Ranger and Surveyor and Orbiter and Apollo flights were dropped manned lunar exploration like a hot potato, less than 20% of the data resulting from these probes has been studied, and less than 2% has been reported on. I personally find it a little odd that out of Ranger, Surveyor, Orbiter, and the Apollo flights, less than 20% of the data that we collected has been studied. Not only that, only 2% of it has been reported on. Why? More interesting information that requires you to look at the pictures, unfortunately. There we go. Now, the author of this book, I don't remember the name of it, the author acquired the movie showing the Apollo 14 flag ceremony. Close analysis of this film shows that the flag billowed and waved when astronauts were not touching it, or even close to it. At the end of the flag ceremony, as one of the astronauts moved away from the flag, it began to wave back and forth. In an apparent attempt to mask any further display of atmospheric wind, both astronauts blocked the movie camera's view of the flag. The astronaut nearest the flag began running toward and in front of the camera, while the other astronaut put his arm in front of the lens. The Apollo 14 film above was ordered by the author in 1980 from Movie Newsreels, a company located in Hollywood, California. Okay, so they got the movie of the supposed Apollo 14 flag ceremony from Hollywood, which should be a red flag there. But also, in the movie, it clearly displays atmospheric wind, indicating that there is an atmosphere on the moon, and the astronauts tried to prevent you from seeing it. Another excerpt from the same book. It is not commonly known that the Earth displays the same bell-like ringing or reverberation as the Moon. Such a ringing effect was recorded during the May 22nd, 1960 Chilean earthquake. The ringing continues for a considerable length of time in a regular series of slow impulses which were recorded at various independent seismic stations. The planet rang again as a result of the Anchorage, Alaska earthquake of March 27th, 1964. That's because the Earth is also hollow. But that's a talk for another time. Now, for me personally, you can fling all this scientific data at me that you want, but what really convinces me of something like the claim that the moon is an artificial satellite is, do the indigenous tribes talk about it? And indeed they do. Almost every ancient culture across the planet has mythologies about a time when the Earth did not have a moon. And it was indeed towed into orbit around the Earth. As Jordan Maxwell says, George Lucas is many things, but stupid is not one of them. George Lucas is a massive insider, and that iconic scene in the original Star Wars movie when they're approaching the Death Star, when Obi-Wan Kenobi looks up and he says, "That's no moon, that's a space station." That was George Lucas trying to tip you off, let you know that it's not a moon. It's not a natural satellite. It's an artificial space station. What is it doing there? Well, David Icke has some pretty interesting theories on what the moon's purpose is for, and I suggest looking up him. I don't know. I don't know why it's there. I don't know what it's doing there. I do know that there are multiple contactees, particularly Alex Collier, who's an Andromedan contactee, as he claims, and the Andromedans claim that the moon actually originated in Ursa Minor, which is like the Big Dipper constellation, and was towed into orbit around the Earth by reptilians. I find that pretty interesting, considering Alex Collier has never talked to people such as Kreno Mutwa, the ancient Zulu knowledge keeper, who also talks about in ancient times when the Earth didn't have a moon. There's so many correlations between various sources that I have a very strong inkling that the moon is a space station. Whether or not this has convinced you, I really don't give a shit, but all this stuff fascinates me, so thank you for joining me on this journey, and I'll be talking to you soon about something new, exciting. Alright.